Those headlines that were reported, and I'm not saying that what JD Vance stated wasn't true, but the talks did not break down at all. The Iranians did not agree to the United States demands, and they weren't, ready to negotiate with Iran, is what it seemed like. And then they made claims that no one from a very senior level and leadership position was in those talks physically, and that they needed to go back. Well, I would push back to say that's what happens when you execute all of the people that you were negotiating with. So now the United States, they need to, and again, this is very important because lives are at stake and foreign policy is at stake. But now they understand that they need to save face because they came back with nothing. And then the threats came for closing the Strait of Hormuz, which damages everybody and absolutely affects our global economy for every single country on this earth. With that said, they didn't break down because here we are. There's going to be an Islamabad 2.0 happening later this week. A delegation is making its way. As I was coming back to the United States and Washington, they're now heading back to Islamabad. And I think that that is a huge sign of positivity and hope that there will be a deal that is made. There's too much at stake here, and the United States realizes that. And Donald Trump personally wants a win. And so we'll see what comes out of these negotiations. But we've heard in between that maybe there's this is, rumors, of course, that Iran has agreed to a 5-year moratorium on uranium enrichment. That's possibly a concession that the Iranians made. The United States is going to have to be willing to give something up as well. So we will see what happens. But I will always be the eternal optimist when it comes to foreign policy, because at the end of the day, it means global order and world peace. Some of those key sticking points were the Strait of Hormuz being opened immediately with no tolls under the orders by the United States that basically Iran does it the United States way or the highway. And Iran was not willing to just greenlight that without any other concessions, meaning the lifting of sanctions, meaning continuing the ceasefire agreement, allowing them to maintain limited levels of uranium enrichment that they already currently still have, because we all know that those were not completely dismantled or obliterated as my U.S. government, officials and administration and cabinet officials stated from last year. That just wasn't true. And also about Israel and Lebanon, which those talks were happening here yesterday in the United States. So the United States, through JD Vance, said, we gave them our points, they didn't agree to them, and so the conversation is over. I think we can all agree that that's not how negotiations work. You don't enter into a negotiation saying, you have to agree to everything that we say or the talks are over. And so that was kind of what the readout was, as far as JD Vance stated in that very short press conference from Serena Hotel after the talks ended after 21 hours. The opportunity here is the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran understands is their major leverage point. It's no longer necessarily uranium or having a nuclear weapon and capabilities. It is the Strait of Hormuz. And the United States understands that very clearly now. And they're going to have to negotiate, or there's going to be severe consequences to the global economy, to the United States economy. And of course, that trickles down into political ramifications for Donald Trump and the GOP. I think there are opportunities if it is true that the Iranians are willing to have a moratorium on uranium enrichment for 5 years. That is incredible. Again, I will say that all of these talks go back to the original JCPOA from the Obama administration, in which I worked in at the time. I didn't work on the deal, but I worked in his administration during that time. And at that time, there were inspectors that were allowed on the ground. There were levels being capped for uranium enrichment. There was sanctions that were relieved for the Iranians as long as they abided by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the Strait of Hormuz was never closed. It was always open. It was always free flowing. Now the situation that we are in is much worse. Oh, and by the way, the Ayatollah was in power. Now his son, who is even more hardline, also along with the people that are also in charge because others have been executed and taken out, those are even more hardline Iranians as well. So this did not put the United States in a better position. We also lost 13 U.S. service members, and hundreds of U.S. service members have been wounded, and it's caused a cataclysmic, chaotic event across the entire Middle East. So I think that there's hope in a few points. Strait of Hormuz, uranium enrichment, sanction relief, and continuing with the ceasefire. And that has to include Israel, and that has to include Israel with Lebanon, because you cannot have one without the other. You can't separate the two, in my opinion. I don't think they can be separated. The Israeli attacks against people in Lebanon, specifically in southern Lebanon and Beirut, they have killed over 3,000 people, injured over 6,500. And this is just in this short time that they have waged these attacks in the last couple of weeks. That is unacceptable. And while we are in a temporary ceasefire, Israel, and it's going back and forth, Iran is continuing to bomb Israel as well. So let me be very clear in that. But how can you have these negotiations when Iran is continuing to get hit from Israel and Israel is continuing to engage with Iran, all while these peace talks are happening? So there has to be some kind of concessions made by Netanyahu as well. And that's where there's going to be difficulty, I feel, is this power dynamic between Netanyahu and Trump. Him saying last week, I told Bibi to cool it. That's not enough. We all know that that's not enough. And Donald Trump uses very strong words and rhetoric. He needs to amp up the heat on Bibi Netanyahu, or I don't see how we can have long-term peace and long-term stability in the region. When you're talking about closing the Strait of Hormuz, that could include around 10,000 U.S. troops in order to effectively be able to instill that blockade that President Trump is talking about. Also, Karg Island, that would involve boots on the ground, and it would involve a pretty extensive period of time, I believe. It's not just a one and done, which is what Donald Trump wants at this point. It's already been, 47 days. He thought this would be done in a matter of days, if not weeks. That was also the impression that Bibi Netanyahu gave to Donald Trump when he visited the White House and sold him on this idea in the first place. I think that there can be concessions that are made with regards to the strait, but it's going to have to come from both sides. The United States making these threats to close it down completely is just not feasible. And then you will have all of our allies coming forward to say, look, this cannot happen, and putting even more pressure on Donald Trump in order to keep this open and not make these threats while the United States is still in active negotiations with Iran. The technical teams are still on the ground in Islamabad. They never left, to my knowledge. So these talks never really concluded, but high-level officials, they left, and now they're supposedly coming back. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity here, but both sides need to make concessions here. And it's all about the Strait of Hormuz. That is affecting the entire global economy and the stability in the region, as well as for our Gulf partners, who they remain on high alert. Now you have threats that Iran is going to possibly attack Turkey and Syria. I mean, this needs to get under control as soon as possible. Well, let me just say and congratulate, as I have all week, the efforts by Field Marshal Munir and the Prime Minister Sharif to get these groups, these delegations to the table. The host, Pakistan, this entire last week was incredible. The hospitality, the friendship, the kindness, the image that they portrayed to people and journalists like myself, international journalists on the ground, showed the change in Pakistan, what Pakistan actually looks like. Islamabad, I will say, because this is where most of the delegation and journalists were, that this is a new image for Pakistan. And that's really important for everyone to see that. It is safe, it is secure, it is warm, it is welcoming, and you wouldn't even have the chatter of a second Islamabad 2.0 if this was not true, if people did not feel safe. High-level United States delegation officials coming to the region. So I think that there's huge opportunity for Pakistan moving forward to be this mediator, to be this facilitator and friend to our allies, and continue to remain neutral in this. They never picked sides between Iran and the United States, and that was a very wise strategic move, because if they would have done so, they never would have even been considered as hosts, I don't believe. And you saw once Donald Trump on Sunday, I believe, he put out a tweet congratulating and praising both of those individuals for bringing the parties together. And again, I think that's why we're even contemplating and entertaining an Islamabad 2.0 discussion, because of the experience that they had. JD Vance came back and was very pleased with how things ran on the ground there. It was like clockwork, and that doesn't happen very often. So congratulations to Pakistan. That's an interesting question. I think both could absolutely benefit from it collapsing, but I think more so for Israel, and they need to be able to make concessions here, because this cannot continue. They want to finish the job that they feel that they've started, along with the United States. They're getting pressure from Saudi Arabia also, that's pressuring the United States to finish the job that they started. But I truly hope that Donald Trump comes to his senses and realizes that if he really wants to be this president of peace, that he needs to do the hard work. And that involves getting these difficult actors and sometimes rogue states to the table to come to some sort of a deal, because this benefits everybody. And if you continue to take out who is left in Iran, it's only going, in my opinion, from my analysis, it's only going to lead to much more difficulty, and you're running out of people that are even willing to come to the table with the United States and even entertain the thought of dealing with Israel. These talks are incredibly important, but I need to stress to your viewers and to the international community that diplomacy is a fragile negotiation and enterprise. You do not achieve peace within days or weeks. Everybody should understand that, especially those in the region, because these conflicts can last decades. I am not calling for this to last for any longer than it already has been. But if these next round of talks don't result in, okay, there's world peace, everyone's going to come to the table, there's going to be beauty and rainbows and sunshine everywhere, I am not saying that that will happen, and no one should expect for that to happen. We need incremental change. Like I said, continuing the ceasefire. I hope that there's a permanent ceasefire, not just a temporary ceasefire. I hope that Israel can come to its senses and be included in the ceasefire, and they understand that it also benefits them and their allies to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. It also benefits Iran to have these concessions these sanctions lifted that they are under right now. It also benefits Iran to have the region that is more stable and not chaotic. It also benefits them to have their civilization back to normal, that they are not continuing to get threats of their energy infrastructure, the desalination plant, their cultural and historical sites being disseminated, and having the US president making threats that he's going to eliminate and obliterate their entire civilization. Nobody wants that. I do not personally want that. But they also need to tone down the rhetoric, the Iranians, because that is the talking point that the right continues to use, is death to America, death to the West. I don't see any more extreme hardliners coming in that would not continue that kind of talk. So all sides need to temper the temperature. They need to lower it, bring it down, and realize that this is a crucial moment for all concerned. And you cannot waste these opportunities, because they might not come around again. People's patience is wearing very thin, especially when you are talking about the lives of military individuals going over to this region, being put in harm's way, and their families and their loved ones and their partners and their husbands and their wives and their sisters and their brothers and their mothers and fathers are all very concerned about sending more US troops over there, as well as the economic consequences here in the United States that is hurting Donald Trump, hurting his political party every single day that this continues to go on, because nobody on both sides understand clearly what the imminent threat was, why Donald Trump decided to do this at this moment, and why he continues to engage in this 47 days in when he said this would be, quick and dirty, and this would be over soon. That is not what is happening. The longer this goes on, this protracted war, it hurts everybody, especially politically. Those members of Congress in the House and Senate that are running for re-election right now. It looks like the Democrats are going to have the majority, at least in the House, if not the Senate at this time. And that will be a game changer for Donald Trump, and he realizes that.